Welcome back. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime, where we look at matters economy today. Now, parties battling over the lease of Mumias Sugar Company clashed over whether the receiver manager, Ramana Rao, should be kicked out or not. Commercial Court Judge Alfred Mabea, in an insolvency case, had that Rao had defied court orders and had not properly managed the receivership process. Lawyer Judy Kimeto wants the court to order for a forensic audit and further order for a fresh bidding process. According to Kimeto, the leasing process ought to have been done strictly under the Competition of Kenya requirements. She claimed that creditors never chose the receiver manager. Instead, he was allegedly imposed on them.
So that I can allow my learning that primarily applies to. Have these been demonstrated?
And that story, of course, just also set the segue of the demise, so to speak, of Mumias Sugar, where it is right now. And the debate also is out there whether Mumias, as we know, it is a private firm. Of course, government also having a large shares inside Mumias Sugar. But questions have been raised on how Mumias receivership has been managed, and also the resumption of the operation of Mumias Sugar to also Sarrai Group at the end of the day, which the court had stopped. But we want to see, where did the rain start beating Mumias Sugar? And generally, that also epitomizes the sugar industry in general, to see how is it panning out right now, especially with the reforms that the Ministry of Agriculture have been trying to implement within this particular sector since we had that particular report from the Senate, the task force that was set up by President Uhuru Kenyatta to try and bring sobriety in this particular sector as well. So with me, if you're just joining us, we have Professor Exen Iraki, who is a professor at the University of Nairobi School of Business. Also, we do have with us Rosalinda Simiu. She is the former director at Nzoia Sugar. Also, she is the former national chair of Kenya. Let me just give you the correct of Kenya Union of Sugar Plantation and Allied Workers Union, where she was leading that particular union for 3 terms. Also, we do have engineer Fred Nabangi, who is a management consultant and has been also involved heavily with Mumias Sugar, hacking way back to the early 80s as well. And of course, we do have with us former Senator of Mandera and also a businessman and the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, that is the former chair of the Senate Finance Committee. Now, let's just get down to brass tacks and try to see how Mumias Sugar is faring. And I can see Iraqi also been flipping over to the Standard to just try and see where the shares of Mumias Sugar, how it is really, being treated on the Nairobi Securities Exchange right now. Yeah, we can give us details of that. Let's just begin from there. Mumias, where did the rain start beating Mumias? And what is going on with the leasing saga that we have in courts right now?
I've just read today's dailies, and I saw that the price of stock for Mumias Sugar is about 27. The last time it was traded, it was 27 cents.
What daily is that? Is that the Standard?
The Daily Nation. The Daily Nation. And I think that was quite a very low price, and that shows the value, the market capitalization of Mumias Sugar has really gone down. I was in the supermarket yesterday evening. I don't remember finding Mumias Sugar in the supermarket. I don't know why it disappeared, but I found sugar from other companies. So that's not a very good sign. As far as Mumias Sugar Company is concerned. There was one time, even in our business schools, we used to use Mumias Sugar Company as a case study of how a company can be managed, how it can be blended, how it can be successful. So it's a very sad case because we are not talking about it today. But I think the big issue about Mumias Sugar is not so much about receivership. There are bigger issues than that. And one of them is the control of the sugar industry. There's a report in the news that if the current leasers, the people who are being leased this company, take it up, and they are going to control more than 40% of the sugar market. And from a competitive point of view, that is not good. So it's not just about one company, it's about the sugar industry and who is going to control it and the money they are in. But I think we are missing a very important point here because we focus too much on sugar, not the value addition. One of the questions people have been asking is, why is imported sugar so cheap compared with our local sugar? So we need to improve the efficiency of our sugar market, of our sugar factories, so that the price goes down and we become competitive. But what did I find? If you go to Brazil, for example, they don't focus so much on sugar that we put in our tea or our coffee. They focus on the value addition, using that sugar to produce gasohol. So to them, sugar is a byproduct. The most important focus is gasohol, which is used for driving cars and so on. And number three, there is too much politics in sugar. If you look at an industry like flour, the flour industry is doing well in this country. You hear very little about politics. You hear very little government. So maybe one thing we need to do is to remove the government out of the sugar industry and let the industry sort itself like the flour industry, which has done very well. And you can be sure as we go to the 2022 polls, there will be more politics in this industry. So why are we bringing so much politics into pure economic issue? Are you telling me that people in the sugar industry cannot be able to manage that industry? Why can't we? I know the government can be a regulator, but I think that this industry should be there to grow, sort itself out, value add, and at the end of the day, we have people in Western Kenya getting value for their money. Because when sugar industry or sugar factories go down, it's not you and me who suffer. Because we can get imported sugar from Brazil in the supermarkets, but what about the farmers in Western Kenya who grow sugar, who take 6-8 months to grow that? I think it takes about almost 2 years to grow sugar cane. What do they do? So we must think about the whole supply chain, from the farmers up to the table or to this cup where we put our sugar. Let's not do piecemeal reform in the sugar industry. Let it be complete. Because about lives, it's about jobs, it's about ordinary people, not just about the big companies.
All right. Okay, let's hear from Rosalinda. I think you have a rich stream of information of what is really happening in the entire sector. Let's just begin from...
I think Professor has aptly put it the way he has stated. Actually, the problem in sugar industry is bigger than what meets the eye. Even these fights that are going on, basically, don't look at what is... You need to have an in-depth understanding of what is really beneath all these fights with the receiver manager. First, I think it was around 2008, 2009, there was a session paper by Parliament that Treasury was asked, actually, there was this, the debts of the sugar industry was supposed to be written off. But to date, nothing was effected. As they wrote off debts in other sectors, sugar's debts were not. And yet there was a session paper. I think between 2008 2009, they need to have the debts of the sugar industry written off. We need to do that for starters so that the value of the industry, if we don't do that with the debt within the sugar industry, anybody going to buy that industry will buy it for a song. And then not only that, we have had cases whereby, for example, Mumias was a giant, such that even the technology it was using in the crushing, it was not using mills. Basically, it was using a diffuser. It was huge. But then, from the start of around, Mumias started going down, things started going south around 2013, 2014. But the picture that was painted was a very different picture.
A rosy one.
Yes. While the inside it was dying, the outside looked rosy. There were issues that now when the industry started, when you start seeing yourself doing so many things at the same time, we brought in the diffuser, we started an ethanol plant, we were building walls, we were doing all things were going on at the same time. And these would not have been saved because the biggest business of the sugar industry would have been the wellness, taking care of the people who supply the raw material. So when it got to a level whereby now the diffuser, Mumias was not able even to produce the cane that it was required. It started getting cane from Busia. And then we started having wars within the sugar industry. Sugar wars were there. And it was bad because some industries were poaching cane from other industries. And then this matter was tried to be, it was even taken to court where they were seeking arbitration. And we had this, by then that had been put in law about the 21-kilometer distance where you are not supposed to build another industry then at a distance of about 21. But then we had West Kenya, then we had Butali. But you find that when Butali was being put up, it was actually licensed by the same regulator that was supposed to make sure that they adhere to the regulations. Because they were given the go-ahead by then the Kenya Sugar Development Authority. It gave them the go-ahead to put up a plant, just not, I think, is it 10 kilometers radius to the other. So when these wars now came in, now it was everybody for themselves and God for all of us. Then also the problem now when during politics, there was a scarcity of sugar, and it was cheaper to even to get sugar across the border from Kakira, from Lugazi, to be brought into Kenya. And not only that, when they put in place mechanism to allow the millers have a right to import. And some millers found that it is easier, it's cheaper. You know, when you import sugar, you deal with very few farmers. So when the millers were allowed to import sugar, the intention was good, that in case there's a shortfall, instead of the public or people just importing anyhowly, the millers would sit and they would look at the shortfall and agree how the shortfall would be brought in. But then some of them found that it's easier to import and cheaper because you know sugar is a byproduct from Brazil. It's a byproduct. It's not the main product. So it's cheaper to buy the sugar. They bring in the sugar. You only need to do is bring it in. Some don't even, because when the raw sugar is brought in, it's supposed to be taken through one last process before it's packaged. But some of them were just bringing it in and taking it straight to the market, and you'd find that there were even issues of mercury being found in the sugar. It's just the greed that took over the sugar industry. And when this greed took over, the farmer, who was very important, who even when they were creating the sugar industry, in the initial objective of the industry was to make these farmers, to create wealth within these areas. These people were forgotten. And then because of the period again that the cane takes, because if you plant cane, it will take like about 24 months before you harvest the first crop. In between the 2 years, this farmer, what is the farmer doing? The sugar industry stopped thinking because they needed to have something in between. As I plant my cane, it's a crop for 2 years. And then for 2 years, maybe if you have 1 acre of land, you might get after 2 years, the most you might be paid, the tonnage can give you about 70,000 shillings if you've done very good cane husbandry. Now, you divide that by the number of months, you find that the amount of money you're paying yourself monthly is below the poverty line, because you might be earning about 3,000, 4,000 shillings a month. So what the sugar industry really needs, when we talk about reforms, let the reforms be genuine. Let us understand where we are coming from.
Thank you.
Because
yes, let the reforms be genuine.
Let the reforms be genuine.
Hang on to that thought so that I can rope in also Engineer Nabangi on this as well. We want also to hear from your side, what has been your assessment right now that you're coming to these reforms that Rosalinda is saying, let it be genuine. Is there political will to actually implement these reforms from the task force report? Do you think they were realistic at the end of the day, if you're intimately familiar with the document? Engineer.
Okay, I don't have close understanding of the document for reform, but
all right. I think I'm having issues with the mic. I'll try and sort it out so that we can actually continue with you. Just hold on to your thought. I'll sort out the mic, then we'll come to you. But in the meantime, let me hear from Honorable Bill Okero. In Senate, this is where the debate was at the end of the day. We know also the composition of that task force. We had former Senator by then, who is the governor of Kisumu, Anyang' Nyong'o as well, amongst others, who came up with a very robust report. But we can see the glacial pace that is being implemented still. We wouldn't be having the cases we're having right now in courts with the Mumias, leases.
Let me just, because I've been involved in one way or the other with Mumias for a while. In late 1990s, as a consultant, a private consultant, I did extensive study on the cost of production, for Mumias sugar. And one of the things that, because it was after liberalization really of the sector, that the questions of competitiveness came in. You know, that we had to compete with Kenya, we had to compete with Malawi, Mauritius, other countries. So we looked at the cost of production of Mumias sugar and how, and at that time it was still very profitable, by the way. Two things came up. One, the TC, the tons cane and tons sugar. TC is an important ratio when you want to look at the amount of sugar that you get from the amount of cane, or you know, it's a very important indicator. One of the things that we realized was very poor when you compare to countries in the region, and the reason is because of the type of the variety of the sugar that was being planted in Mumias, and the variety depends on the soil. There were a lot of things. So instead, what we recommended is that they needed to look at the variety that can perform better, so that you can improve the TC/TS ratio. That's one of the things. But compared to the Nyando belt, Muhoroni and Miwani and Chemelil, still Mumias had the best yield in terms of performance because of its TC/TS ratio. Number two was, which surprised me, was the cost of production. The amount of money being spent, on maintaining the mills. Hundreds of millions were being wasted. This is where the corruption was. Every single item was inflated. And this is where we flagged and said, look, that company could make billions more if only the question of procurement, the question of management really was addressed. But by then, the company was still very profitable. Years down the road, NAC came to power. It's not actually 2013. After NAC came to power and everybody said it was their turn, the management was changed. The management that came in later really started taking the company down the hill. The profitability started going down. I ended up as a member of the board of Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission when PLO member was the CEO, I remember. Yes. And that was one of the times when we decided to do a thorough investigation of that company. And that is when there was a lot of corruption going on, because what was happening is in the sales now of the sugar. That's where the losses were coming in. And one of the things we decided was to zero in on the people who are managing, who are taking billions out, and we had evidence. And this issue came up now of the ownership. They argued through their lawyers that this is a private company, you cannot investigate us. Yes. And PLO, I remember, through his lawyers said, no, this company is controlled by government, so it's a state corporation and we must be able to examine it. And we did. And in fact, when the matter became very hot, let me tell you, you remember, the Kenyan Anti-Corruption, PNO and his team were all bundled out by law. The whole law was one evening, and it was done by members from that region, by the way, because the beneficiaries of all the things that were happening are the leaders. Let me tell you frankly. It was the cash cow. That is the place where you would get money. That's the place where you would walk in and walk out with 10 million, 20 million if you wanted. That was the reason why every leader from the Nyanza and Western Kenya was really supportive of the management of that company. So when we decided to focus on it, immediately that entity was disbanded. But let me tell you, that company, frankly, even Chemelil, by the way, which now is whatever, it was performing very profitably at the time. So I think, frankly speaking, the reason why that industry is down is not because of any other reason other than the management, frankly speaking. And management is bad because leaders are not committed to ensuring that those companies run profitably. You found a situation, remember when that investigation was done, there are even cases where some of the leaders were encouraging the company to import, using licenses of Mumias to import sugar. And frankly, that industry supports, at the time I knew, it was supporting over 2 million people directly, who were the farmers. And so what happened is that when the Mumias was privatized, that was one of the major reasons why it was considered that, look, we cannot manage this institution, let us give it to private sector, let it be run professionally. I was involved in the IPO. It was done very well, the largest IPO that was done at the time after KQ. The outgrowers were given shares, the employees were given shares, the public. Things went on well, but I think later the management of that company by the government officials who were running that entity is the reason why it collapsed. And government has not been very helpful in the sugar industry. Let's be frank. You give 50 billion the other day in a supplementary budget, 3 months to the end of the year, to Defense Ministry, or for example. Or you give 146 billion to KQ. I mean, you give, every time you want to assist Mumias is 1 billion shillings. You know, I will give 1 billion shillings. And that billion takes too many years in coming. So there's no commitment. This thing gives 2 million farmers direct benefit and millions more indirect benefit. So if the government is really committed to, that is one of the sectors that need, because that, if you want to fight poverty, that is an area that the government needed to have given money, and there is no goodwill. That is a fact, and the unfortunate thing is that it has been the cash cow for every leader in Nyanza and in Western Kenya, and this is why those companies have not been able to run profitably, in my view.
All right, maybe if you have the mic of Nabangi sorted, we hear from Rosalinda that you know, even this sugar that is coming from Brazil, it's a byproduct, you know, of the cane. It is not the main, so to speak, cash cow of that particular industry. It is a byproduct at the end of the day. Should we maybe also be changing the strategy? Because we know there's ethanol that is coming from there. There is also a water that you know, can be captured as well at the end of the day, you know, via the steam that is really coming out of the day. Why don't we, if sugar is not really forthcoming, we've said because of the varieties at the end of the day, maybe they're not yielding much and the farmers are not really accruing much profit from them. Why then can't we, in this strategy and in these reforms, try and reconfigure the entire sector so that sugar is not the main product but the end product? We never gaze on ethanol, we never gaze on water. Water has become, you know, the bottled water has become a big industry in this country at the end of the day. Nabangi, let's just hear from you.
First of all, I want to associate with the comments of Honorable Kero. The management of Mumias, right from the ministry, the Sugar Board or the Kenya Sugar Development Authority, to the board and the executives that were in Mumias, all of them have a role and they have a responsibility to account for the failure of Mumias, because they had a hand in it. Having said that, looking at sugar as the product that was coming from out of Mumias, personally I feel that it was a miracle that Mumias sugar had been doing so well by only selling sugar to the Kenyan market and a little bit of export when it was doing it. Ideally, this concept of sugar being a byproduct is not new. I remember when I was a young engineer and starting out in consultancy, spending 18 weeks in Mumias with the management at the transition period when Mumias was managed by Bukatet, to understand that the real value of what they were doing in cane processing did not lie in the sugar. That is the time when we sat in a management meeting, in some training, and agreed that there would be diversification. So the idea of diversification, which was rolled out at the turn of the century in Mumias, did not come by accident. The way it was done, in my view, is what is to blame for the downfall of Mumias. Introducing alcohol, ethanol plant, the water, Mumias Pringles, even considering the issue of organic fertilizer from the sludge that was coming out of the processing of sugar at the end. Those are things that were considered, that they should have been proper feasibilities before they were launched. The levels of investment that went into creating those satellite product lines is one of the reasons that Mumias went down. I believe that investment was exaggerated. Obviously, this corruption is not just starting with the transactions of managing the processes. It started even with the investment. So if we want to talk about Mumias going forward, the full supply chain into Mumias must be looked at. Let's not be talking about whether the government is going to be, just paying off the debt, because it can pay this debt off 10 times, Mumias will still go down. There must be a structured approach that if Mumias is to be restarted and run as an enterprise, it will be run on a model that is sustainable. The product range that Mumias should give starts with what has already been stated, that sugar is simply a byproduct. It should not carry the 100% cost that is levied. Essentially, sugar could only contribute perhaps 10 to 15% of what the costs of running Mumias should be. If we approach it from that perspective, then realistically, in a very short time, we can turn the affairs of Mumias around. We must also understand, from what Honorable Bill Cairo has just said, the kind of cane that is grown around Mumias, which takes 24 months to mature, is a very significant setback in trying to make that company more profitable. So there must be research, and there is no reason why that has not been done for over 50 years, to bring a species of cane that will perhaps mature in half the time or even as quickly as the one in Kenana, which does 9 months. We know that Kenana has a different regime in terms of environment and soil. But there are areas around Mumias. For example, Budalangi gets flooded every year. Budalangi region and the shores of the River Nile, which is where Kenana Sugar Factory is, are not different. So why wouldn't we have such cane grown in that place and processed in Mumias? And Budalangi is a pain in the neck of the people from that region. Yet it would be a huge profit if we were growing cane and benefiting from this water, which instead of giving us profit, washes our homes away and destroys our other products, farm products.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Let me just drop in also Professor Iraqi on this, because I know now that we've heard from Bill Okero and Nabangi as well, even when it comes to the issue of whether it is a private farm or it is a public, at the end of the day. Because people are questioning why then are we, dragging Mumias to court when it comes to leasing issues, when it comes to receivership. KCB has a right, if their money is not, being paid at the end of the day, to, put it under receivership at the end of the day. So this has been the contentious issue right now, but it's very clear right now that it is. I don't know from your view, a private farm.
Let me start by disclosing that I have very deep historical connection to Mumia Sugar Company. I got my first job offer in high school to join Mumia Sugar Company. Actually, I was informed to. I was given a job application form, and I gave it to a friend of mine. I didn't take it up. So if things had gone that way, I would probably been an employee of Mumia Sugar Company. And recently, I was looking for the guy I gave that form, and he got a job. He left school, by the way, in Form 2 and went to work. And I was told that he is deceased. And I've been looking forward to meeting him after very many years. That apart, we can also look at a company like Kenya Power. The government is a shareholder, but it is listed on the stock exchange.
Yes.
Mumia Sugar is listed, but the government is injecting money. And this is the dicey situation we have in this country about the control of private companies by the government. And that's why I argued earlier that one of the reasons why Mumia Sugar is not doing very well is there's too much interference from outside. Look at all the innovations we are talking about, focusing on gas, focusing on water, focusing on fertilizer. We could have done that if this company was given the freedom to operate. But now the question to be asking is, who determines who is going to be the MD of Mumia Sugar and other sugar companies? It might appear from outside that it is free, it is something done by the company itself. But if you dig deeper, as my sister put it, there might be other external factors that determine who is going to be in charge of Mumia Sugar, who is going to be in charge of other companies where the government has a stake. And I think we can use the Safaricom model. The government has about 40% stake in Safaricom. But where does the government interfere with Safaricom? And that's why the Safaricom company or Safaricom has done so well, because it has been given freedom to operate, to be innovative, to do what it finds suitable under the current circumstances. So if Mumia Sugar is private, why can't it be allowed to operate like a private company? Make decisions that are strategic to its future, whether it is procurement, whether it is coming up with new products, whether it is importing products. Why can't we allow Mumia Sugar to do that? And I give an example of Safaricom, an example of the flour industry. Because the government should do its business, which is regulating the industry, not being part of the industry. Because look at this case about the receivers being kicked out, being kicked in. Who is suffering? My sister said it. It is the farmers. Biro Kero put it. It's the 4 million farmers who directly benefit from that sugar company. So I think we should not be using the law or the legal process to stop economic processes or economic decisions. It should facilitate, not the other way around.
Right, thank you. And Rosalinda, we had also from Bilokero, when we talk about the bailouts, we had 1 billion shillings of being pumped to Mumias Sugar by the government. When Nakumat was really going down the tubes as well, Kenyans were crying, why can't the government really come in handy and help Nakumat? Yeah. And if Nakumat was listed, was it listed at the Nairobi? It was not listed.
But people are demanding, can you list it?
Can you list it? It was not listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange at the end of the day. But people were saying government should come and bail out. If we have Mumias as a private farm right now and government pumping in 1 billion shillings, don't you think also maybe they're playing selectively in terms of bailing out some of its industries? Your perspective?
That is true. Yeah, the bailout by the government is kind of selective. But then we look at a case like Mumias. You could see 1 billion that has been pumped in. But actually how much is needed to get Mumias on its feet? Mumias doesn't need 1 billion to be bailed on its feet. Mumias needs something like 5 billion to help it to get back on its feet. So by putting 1 billion, it's just a drop in the ocean, which might not realize what you want to achieve.
But even if the 1 billion, the government is not supposed to give it 1 billion at the end of the day.
Yeah, that is right.
That is just a good gesture from government.
Yes, that is
so
a good...
you should not be going with your pen in hand asking the government, can you bail us out at the end of the day? Maybe also the argument will come with the KQ, Professor.
That is true. Like, the government doesn't have to do it. But because the government feels it has a responsibility to try and create that place to be economically, to bring back the economic power that Mumias had brought. That is why it feels that it has a responsibility towards these people. But what I'm saying sometimes is even these bailouts as they are done, honestly, because even if you follow that 1 billion that is supposedly injected, you'll be surprised how much really gets to the point where it is needed.
Accountability.
Yeah, that is the problem. You could say, okay, we've given 1 billion bailout. But then the amount that gets to the ground to really doing maybe it's half of the total amount that has been given out. Now, there's this issue that was mentioned about the type of cane that takes 24. I know Kenya Sugar Research, when it was there under the Sugar Development Authority, before it was disbanded, was handling that bit of research and on the type of cane that were early maturing to enable the farmers. But then, even if you look at the act then that was there, the 2001 Sugar Act, then it came back to this agriculture of 2013, then we now have the current bill 2019. You still see that they have pegged the payment of a farmer on the sucrose content. The purpose of paying a farmer on the sucrose content, not on the weight of the cane, was for the purposes they were looking into that, yes, this cane has a lot of things that can be generated from it. Ethanol, pepper, you can get even sugar, you can get even the boards for construction. And not only that, they have found that even the trash, after cutting the cane, can actually be used as a cattle feed. But then, though from 2001, they have paid payment to a farmer on the sucrose content, they have not put in place measures to actualize that kind of payment because it's a bit scientific. So, and then the farmers found that the early maturing cane was not heavy when it went on to the weighbridge. It was kind of lighter. So they found that the long maturing cane had more weight when you take it to the weighbridge. So you find that most farmers were not willing to go for the lighter, which is early maturing, it will give them less tonnage. And this is a case where your payment is pegged on the tonnage that you supply. So that's why I'm saying that if indeed the government is committed on reforms, let the goodwill be there. If indeed you're saying that you're paying the farmers on the sucrose content, put in Kenya, we don't lack the knowledge to put such a thing in place. Let it be actualized so that a farmer who works well, and like Mheshimiwa said, the TCD sugar, that is the amount of sugar you crush out of, like the best is usually if you can get 9 tons to produce 1 ton of sugar, is 9 to 1. The ratio of 9 to 1 is considered the best. But you would find sometimes you're using about 13 tons to produce a ton of sugar. So that means that you're doing nothing actually. You're producing a lot of molasses and a lot of bagasse. You're not producing the sugar which you require, because normally that happens either when the cane is premature or maybe it is too old. Now, that's why I'm saying that yes, the government is committed, and if the leadership also from these 2 areas, in Nyanza and Western, can be committed to see that the sugar industry thrives. Because it should not be a case of them even hiding behind the millers. And even this shove and push that is in Mumias, it is not Rao, it's not Rayo. They are just political forces behind who have interest in taking over the sugar industry. Because sugar industry is very lucrative, for your information. It's a very lucrative industry. If you can import the sugar, you have no business paying a farmer, you are not paying a worker, you are not paying a supplier. The difference is you and the interest. And that is why there's been a lot of shadow boxing in the sugar industry. And that is why every time there's an election around the corner, sugar matters will be really in force. Everybody's talking, how can we revamp, how can we improve? After the elections are done, it's a closed chapter. Why can't we keep the discussion even after the elections? So that indeed that farmer and the jobs that were created within these industries can be able to help grow the urban, the rural-based population.
Thank you. Honorable Bilokero, the politicization of this industry, of course, is evident. And we've seen also some of the receiver managers being dragged before Senate before. And the question was, if this is a private farm, what in the world are they doing before Senate to, answer questions on receivership? We've seen investors like Devki wanting to pump billions of shillings to, Mumias Sugar at the end of the day. But he got, contestations from, other forces, and he, dropped the entire decision to actually pump billions into Mumias Sugar and revive Mumias Sugar. Could you just talk about this politics of the sugar industry, as it were, and how it is stifling this industry at the end of the day? And why can't we name these politicians who have vested interests in Mumias Sugar at the end of the day? First of all, was it right even for them to appear before the Senate? I think that was during your regime. You can give us more info.
I will explain that the government has about 20% shareholding in the Mumias Sugar. The issue is the controlling interest. You may have a small percentage, like 20% or whatever, in a company, but if all the other shareholders are having significantly smaller, shares, then you have the largest controlling interest, and those you control the company. In terms of the number of directors, in terms of appointment of the CEO, then the government has, it was controlling the company, and this is why, from the government perspective, then it's part of their, and this is the same thing with Kenya Airways. I mean, they did not have, majority shares, but they had to, because they were having the controlling shares. In terms of bailing, then it is not private company or financing. What the government did, for example, in Kenya Airways, was to convert whatever it is putting in into shares. So that it's not just money you are giving, but it's either debt or you can convert it into equity at a later date. And so it increases the shareholding of the government by the amount of money that it puts in. And this is something that then is discussed with all the shareholders, that because this is something that is done normally formally through the AGMs and so forth. So in my view, really, this is about food security. Sugar is about food security. Let's not focus on the byproducts. Sugar is critical. We need 600,000 to 700,000 metric tons annually. We are not able to generate that, and we have to import substantial amounts from outside. So we need to revive. Many years ago in the 80s, I remember when all the 11 factories were running, we were self-sufficient. We were exporting to as far as EU countries. So I think so there's a case really for the government putting in money. It is in public interest to ensure that there's food security, and you know, we save money when you are producing, and you create opportunities for employment and also for the people who are dependent on sugar. Now on the politics, immediately after Mumias was privatized, there was a proposal to now privatize the remaining sugar like Chemelil. In fact, it was so advanced that the last minute these things were scrapped. The reason why they're scrapped, I'll tell you, is what happens every time there's a state corporation to be privatized. Those who are interested in government, what they want is they want to buy companies at a throwaway price. So when a company is very profitable and doing very well and the balance sheet is very good, nobody wants it to be put out there because then it becomes very expensive. So there's an attempt to try and run it down so that then it can be privatized and put on sale when it is, you know, at a low value. And this, you saw it on National Bank, you saw it. Many state corporations could not be privatized because of the interests that wanted it delayed so that they can be in a position, or they position themselves to be the ones who will benefit. And this, unfortunately, they are looking at what happened in the 90s and 80s, when during the time of Moi, most of those companies in the private sector were taken over by people in government. So I think what is happening now, what is playing out is clearly, in my view, part of it is sibling rivalry between these families in Kenya and Uganda who are also competing. That, I think, contributes to part of the problems we are seeing in this takeover. But at the same time, I think there are people in government, you know, whom we can't name on national TV, but people in government who are also involved. You know, this Sarrai Group there are people who have interests, significant interests in them, and so it's not that easy. So there's a lot of politics involved in it, and this is from at very high levels of government. And I think so. It's not a matter that of a receiver and you know and some other simple shareholders who are opposed to it and so forth. I think there's need to demonstrate commitment at the highest level in cabinet, in government, that if you were to privatize, then like go ahead and privatize and give it to the highest bidder, and stop playing games, you know, with the minds of Kenyans, you know. And government sits out there, they see what is going on, they are not doing anything about it, and so it's unfortunate. I mean, it's clear, and those who are elected to defend the interests of those people really should look at it, you know, a bit more seriously and demand that something be done, and the government should really. So it's very important. Clearly, the government cannot run this industry. It's clear. That's why the whole concept of privatizing started those days. In Zoya, all of them, they were to be privatized so that then the government is out of it and try and leave it to because it's a very profitable business. Whoever wants to take it will do a good job about it. That there's no doubt about it. We've seen it in Uganda, we've seen it in Malawi, Mauritius, Sudan, every other place in Africa, in the region. Sugar is being done very profitably by those companies. So I think it's important that the government comes out clearly. If they want to privatize this company, they should go ahead and finalize so that they can save the farmers and the people of Western Kenya from this drama.
We've seen also there has been special umbrage raised, especially from the chair of the Kenya National Alliance of Sugar Farmers, KENAFSO, that is Saulo Busolo, at the end of the day, where we saw politicians were trying to annul, you know, the sugar regulatory policy that really came up with the crop regulation 2020 that you know, has also very keen interest on the pricing of the sugar at the end of the day. When we talk about also payment formula at the end of the day. Could we also just get clarity on this, and why particularly politicians, if this is a vested interest, who are fighting this annulment of a sugar policy, regulation policy? Kiro, briefly.
There is an interplay of the private sector. You would appreciate that there are private companies in the region that are producing sugar. And it's an opportunity for them, to also continue dominating in that region. And so when this company like Mumias and Chemelil and others in public sector have started having problems, then those other private companies, have done pretty well, because the cane goes there and so forth, and so they are benefiting. So I think there is a bit of the issue of pricing of cane, the issue, all these things. There's that involvement, of the private sector players in the region also. In my view, that is at play. But I think more importantly, I think in my view, really, the part of the leaders who are involved in this do not appreciate or understand the dynamics involved in this industry.
Thank you.
That's my take.
Right, thank you. Let's hear from Engineer Nabanga also on that.
Let me go back a little bit, Dibal. I come from Western Kenya, and the trend has been profitable industry runs for 20, 30 years, then it just goes downhill. Eventually it is closed like pan paper. Before that, there was a cotton industry. We had ginneries, and we eventually, Rivertex went out of business because we couldn't supply cotton. All these are viable. The sugar industry is on the same route as those two. Honorable Kero has talked about the significance of sugar as part of sustainability for food sustainability for Kenyans. I take a view that if we are not able at the moment to produce sugar at a competitive price, then we cannot make our sugar the reason why the government has to keep bailing a company out every time. We have to find a new way of doing this. And if we can't find it, we should do something else. We can import sugar, and even if we produce sugar in this country, use it for other purposes rather than taking to the table, because it will not compete as stable sugar. That kind of thinking needs to find a way, room in our minds, especially my people, from Western Kenya. The real reason why we are discussing what we are discussing is not failure of politics, perhaps not even failure of government, but failure at the essence of the factors that would make prosperity a reality. If there is no leadership, or if there is poor leadership, you must have the kind of problems that we have. And as a community, and I can speak with authority, that is our problem. So we can go on blaming everybody else, but until we face this reality that we are the ones who are growing cane, we are the ones who want to take it to the market, and we have to find a way to compete with this cane or with any other product, and that is our thinking, not imposed on us, then we are just doing nothing. So having said that, this cane formula, the pricing formula, in Brazil, they pay you, of course, by sucrose content, but in Brazil, they don't process sugar the way we do here. Most of the people who do sugar in Brazil would deliver it in the form of juice to factory, which means there will be smaller plants that just, convert the cane into juice, and then you can deliver the juice, which then, of course, be assessed on the basis of sucrose. Until you have crushed the cane and extracted the juice, you wouldn't be able to measure the sucrose content. So before we even talk about making that a reality here, we have been doing a lot of benchmarking visits to different places where they produce sugar. Some of those lessons should already have become a reality here in terms of implementation. But it seems we just do jaunts and we do visits to these places to have fun, rather than to use them as lessons for improving our situation. So we will not have the sucrose-based payment to sugar to farmers until we realize that the process we are using right now is not amenable to that. It requires innovation, it requires a new thinking, and obviously that cannot happen if there is no proper leadership for us to change the state of affairs in the sugar sector.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rosalinda, briefly? Then we should be preparing our winding thoughts as well.
Yes.
Briefly.
I was just wondering, if the will is not there, why do we put in place something within the Act if we know that we are not? Because if you look at the Sugar Act of 2001, the formula of payment on sucrose is the one that has been spelled out. And then, yes, I understand that sugar is a very important commodity on the table. But the purpose why they try to look at it in a more diverse way is just to find out how a farmer can be remunerated for all the other things that the cane can bring, apart from sugar. You see, and that is why they were trying to look at it in a more scientific way. So as the farmer could get more remuneration on the raw material that they supply. Currently, a factory like Nzoia Sugar is paying 4,480 per ton to a farmer. And the more reason the government needs to guard, when we have one entity taking control of the industry, they will decide on the price they will pay the farmer, they will decide on the price of the sugar that goes to the table. So, and then also we must understand our Kenyan situation, that the farms are getting smaller, unlike Brazil, because the father has 2 sons. We are keeping the farms are getting smaller, and the smaller they get, the more expensive it is to grow cane and to harvest cane from them. Because the industries, basically sugar is a large farm crop. They try to introduce a way whereby the farms would be pulled together so that you could the farmers could have a certain age at the same time so that they could mechanize even other processes. But in our Kenyan setting, that does not work. So really people need to get back on the drawing board and see what would, let the government be committed, what would be the best way of handling the crisis within the sugar industry in view of making the farmer able not to live below the poverty line as they are currently living. Because a farmer would have cane, but then you would find them leasing it out to somebody so that they can be paid quickly to take their children to school. So if it was cane that even he was supposed to get some good money, but because of the need that they have, they would just lease it off at a throwaway price.
Yeah, thank you. Professor Iraqi, as we're winding up on this, we can see the government, you talk of goodwill. I think the government has been also, showing goodwill. You talk of waiving the debts. Nzoia, I know, was the government waived almost, was it 11 billion shillings? They were never affected. So the government just... It was PR. So this is all PR that we're hearing from. So 11 billion never came through at the end of the day. But if there was that sort of goodwill, then also we should see this particular industry coming around, because I know it was almost 20 billion shillings, a waiver, not the bailout. This was 20 billion shillings for, was it Nzoia and Mumias at the end of the day. Yes. Briefly, as we prepare our headline thoughts.
I think we are discussing a very important issue. And I hope if people from other sectors, agricultural sectors came here, I'm sure they would have their problems, whether it is cotton, whether it is pyrethrum, whether it is potatoes. Agriculture has become a very important sector in this country because of food security. And I'm sure the issues we are discussing about sugar also apply to other sectors. And the big question we should be asking, should the government play such a significant role in agriculture or not? And my take is the government should play a bigger role as a regulator, not as a player. Because if we have these 5, 6, 7 sugar companies in Western Kenya, remember we used to have Ramisi in Mombasa? Nobody talks about it, and I think some of them are being revived. So if we have all these sugar companies, we need an independent referee to come and make sure that they compete at the same level. They don't undercut one another. They don't have vested interests, and the farmer and the consumer like you and me get the best deal. So I think the government should come in as a very good regulator and make sure that there is very good playground for everybody. Number two, I think we need to learn from others in the sugar industry. If we can import American political system with senators and governors, why can't we get the best practices of running sugar factories from Kenana, from Brazil and elsewhere, or even Uganda? We need to do that. Innovation must be implemented in this industry. We cannot do things the way we have always done them, because things have changed. She has talked about farms being subdivided into smaller farms. Technology has changed. Our tastes have changed. So we must bring innovation and some diversification. But most important, we must address the human factor. If you look at what Mheshimiwa Bill Kero said, he talked about vested interest, our behavior. When you have a reader, when you have a manager being in charge of a company, does he read that company, does he manage that company for his own interest or for the interest of this country? And I think this is a time we became more patriotic in this country. So that if we are given a responsibility to run even the smallest company, we do it for the good of for the good of this country, not for our own good.
Thank you.
Because agriculture is going to be critical. It's one of the big four, and we cannot be a proud country if we cannot feed ourselves. Remember, sugar is just put in a cup. Think of the other things like maize. Think of rice. Think of other food commodities.
Thank you.
So the reform should not be in the sugar sector, but in the whole agriculture sector.
Right, thank you. All right, we are winding up. Let's just hear from also Bill Okero on that particular front as we're winding up. Just briefly, your headline thoughts. Is the government overplaying their hands? As we can see, when it comes to regulation, we have also CBK now also coming with a national payment system, the digital currency that is supposed to upset the apple cart when it comes to dominance of other telco players. Very briefly. 30 seconds.
No, I think the government needs to. Today, food security is a major issue globally. And so many countries, governments are playing a critical role on matters of agriculture. But in this country, frankly speaking, all the sectors of agriculture are suffering, whether it's coffee, tea, maize, sugar, and all of them, it's the role of government in terms of regulating the industry that is the challenge. And because in coffee the government is not actually a farmer, or they don't run the mills, but through regulation, through policy, in every sector they have. But where they want to do something, like in coffee, in tea, in milk, they have done it. And where they don't want to do something, in maize, in sugar, in many of the other sectors, livestock, they haven't. For years it's been the same story, and I think the government needs to appreciate that food security going forward is a major thing, and the government needs to put its act together on this matter.
All right, Fred Nabangi as well. Your closing remarks, 30 seconds.
The sugar sector is where it is because of corruption. Simple. Second thing, the model that we're using for running the sugar sector is the wrong one. Personally, I think we should simply make the sugar sector a process that is run by the cooperative model. The farmers, who are the greatest stakeholder in the sugar sector, should be the ones that own and run that enterprise.
Thank you. Let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. I want to appreciate all of you for that very cogent discussion we've had. And I hope also the policymakers are listening as well to some of the very germane issues that you've raised here. I want to thank you, Rosalinda Simiu, who is the former chair of the Kenya Union of Sugar Plantation and Allied Workers, also former director of Nzoia Sugar. We want to thank you also, Professor Exen Iraki, who is a professor, School of Business, University of Nairobi, also Fred Nabangi, who is a management consultant, and Honorable Bill Okero, who is a former Senator of Mandera and also the former chair of the Senate Finance Committee and a consummate businessman as well. Thank you for your thoughts this morning. You've been watching, of course, Morning Prime, so call it today. It continues apace on the other side. Morning Prime, of course, looking at matters gender. Don't go away. Ashil Mazuri is up next.